Naomi, that's for you guys.
You said you're ready, Jessica?
I am. You are all set.
Okay, we're ready to go. So I'm Lisa Sage. I am on the board as the trustee of diversity and inclusion. And we have a committee that we put together. I started on the board in July of 2020. And I put a committee together that started in December of 2020. My committee members right now include Cynthia Nicholas, she's here, David, McCurry Kaplan, who's on the panel. We also have Jake Scher and Laura Mitchell. And they are not able to be here, but they're probably going to watch us later. Just so you all know, we're recording. So if anyone has any questions or comments that they don't want to be on the recording, just ask us after we finish. Otherwise, just raise your hand when you have a question and we'll call on you. Okay? Just letting you know. So we're recording so that other people that couldn't be here can watch. And there are some people that are, for whatever reason, they cannot come in person. So thank you. So I just want to give you a little brief background about myself, and then I'm going to have David and Sarah introduce themselves. We are the panelists today, and I'm going to be the moderator. So as I said, the committee started back in December of 2020, and we've done a lot of great things. This is our first diversity panel that we're putting on. We've had a couple of panels for Jewish Disabilities Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month. We've had a few of those already. This is the first time we're putting this together. And diversity includes women, people that use wheelchairs, Jews of color, and LGBTQ plus community. So you all know what's included in diversity. So we all represent that here today, the three of us, and probably some of you in the audience. So let me see what else I want to say about myself. So I am a woman. I'm not a Jew of color. I do have a disability. Besides my physical disability, I have a couple of mental health issues, but that's okay. And what else do I have? LGBTQ community. That's probably about it for my introduction for now. If you have anything else you want to know about me later, you can ask that later. I'm going to let David introduce himself. Go ahead.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. I'm David McCarty Kaplan. My pronouns are he, him, his, L. I am super excited to be here today. I've really enjoyed being a part of the committee with Lisa and others. It's an honor actually to be able to contribute to the synagogue community in this capacity, and I'm very excited for this conversation to happen with you all today because it's something I care very deeply about, both personally and professionally. So I was born in Colombia, South America, in Bogota, in 1981. It was a stormy night. I'm kidding. I don't actually know what kind of night it was. But I was born in Colombia, and at about the age of 3 or 4 weeks, I believe, I was adopted from Colombia by my wonderful parents, who are here with me today, Bob and Anita. At the time, they were living in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and so I became an American Jew through adoption. Spent the rest of my life in the United States being raised within a white Jewish family, which has colored my entire life. The process of being an adoptee, the complex challenges of being separated from your biological family, also being part of a wonderful American family, and having that be my lived experience, has certainly led me to be very curious and inquisitive about issues of identity and development and power, privilege, oppression, race, class, gender, all these things. And that led me into the field of social work, where I've worked for all of my career in a variety of capacities. Recently, I've been a professor at Cal State Northridge in the Department of Social Work there, and I'm actually moving into a new position as of this past couple months, doing consulting in social science research, specifically with regard to racial equity and positive social change, and also doing some other consultation on the side related specifically to challenges that Jews of color face in communities much like this one. And some of the ways that larger Jewish communities can improve our kind of inclusion and belonging, or sense of belonging for people of color within Jewish spaces. And also to kind of broaden that to a perspective of how can Jewish people show up in solidarity for communities of color that may not identify as Jews. And these are things that I again, feel very strongly about, and I really find beautiful connections between these pursuits and goals and Jewish values. And that's something that I'm very excited to talk about more with you all today through my own lived experience. So I do want to accentuate that for me personally, my particular experience as an adoptee and a Jew of color and a Latino person is my own experience, and I'm not trying to speak for all people, certainly, but I will do my best to field the questions that relate to the things that I care about. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to let Sarah Flores introduce herself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sarah Flores. I'm Lisa's wife, and I'm happy to be here. I love learning stories, especially not from people. It's really nice. So I was born and raised in Peru, Lima. My family moved to the U.S. when I was 17 to do some high school, and then I did some nursing school, and then I went to Mexico, which was my dream. I went to New York, and then I came back. I already knew Lisa, and then we got married. I worked at Kaiser for 3.5 years, and then now I'm at the VA, where I did my training, so I really love it. It's like combo VA, UCLA, so they teach, give back, teach the rest of the medical school. My special interest is anti-racism in medicine, and, meeting people, even though I'm an introvert, so. I'm a physical medicine rehab doctor. It's a very small field. We call ourselves the bounce back doctors, all about function and quality of life. So, when people have a heart attack or a stroke, hopefully, they recover, but trying to get back to where they were before, that's what we come in. Thank you.
We're sharing a microphone. Okay, so first we're going to have some pre-made questions that we made, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. Okay, so David, I think you already said this, but I'll ask it anyways. Why did you join the panel today?
Yeah, the reason I was excited to join the panel is because Kol Tikva has been such an amazing place for my family since we moved here in 2015. My wife was definitely like the driver in our family for finding a Jewish community that felt right for us here, and I just feel very excited that Kol Tikva exists and it's very close to our home. And now that I'm a parent, I think my connection to what Jewish community means to me is evolving and changing, and I really see it as something that I want to be part of our family every day, every week kind of experience. And for me, that feels most authentic and powerful if I can contribute in some way beyond just showing up to events and things like that. I've got a particular set of skills, and I'm interested in seeing how I can apply them here in ways that help our community, and to also have opportunities to learn from other people. And with regard to diversity, equity, and inclusion, these are things that I was already working in, but the way the committee has been addressing these issues in Kol Tikva's community specifically, and the people on the committee, they're just people I was excited to learn from and to kind of work as a team with. So my reason for being here is just to kind of keep the ball rolling, and just I get excited and jazzed about like energy that can be vibed off of other people getting excited off of the topics they want to talk about, and just like that mutual reciprocity and shared responsibility that we have hopefully in this community. And I'm just really excited to be part of it.
Thank you. Sarah?
I want to support Lisa, number one, her committee, all her hard work. You can see how much work she does and how nice her committee is, so I wanted to also participate. And I want to show off how diverse and welcoming this committee is. So hopefully we can help with that. Oh, I apologize. I'm a Jew of color also. I converted a couple years ago.
Hey.
Why did you convert? I'm curious.
Since we moved to the U.S., the people I've been closest to have been Jewish. It just happened. Like my first favorite teacher, chess coach, was Jewish. And then I met Lisa, I worked with her, and little by little learned about it. And then I went to a Jewish medical school, part of Yeshiva University, the only school that gave me scholarships, so that kind of tells me something. We were trying to get diverse, doctors. And then just through being part of Tikva, this is the only temple I've really known. Lisa was in the choir, and then little by little, we're able to be formal members. So learning about the community, learning about the religion, what people are all about here, really enjoy, learning from the rabbi and the cantor. So eventually, I thought, this is the place for me, so I converted.
Thank you. Why did I join the panel? Well, it's my committee, so I'm here. Okay. So, I'm glad you laughed at that. Okay, the next one is, what are some challenges you face daily or have faced over the years? So, I'll take this one first. So, I have a lot of challenges in my daily life with my disability. I have rheumatoid arthritis I've had since childhood. And some days it's really hard for me to even just get out of bed because I'm in a lot of pain. I also rely on people to help me get dressed, help me shower, help me with meals and things like that. I'm as independent as I can be, but I do need assistance with things. So there are challenges every day I face. And when I go places, I have to make sure there's ramps, there's handicap parking, and things like that. This parking lot is very frustrating for me every time I come, even though I park up the hill, because I have a big van and it's hard to get it in there to park. And today my shoulder's hurting a lot. I had a fall the other day and I'm feeling some things from my fall still. But, and the weather, the rain doesn't help and all that. But anyway, so those are challenges for me, and a lot of people don't know that because I'm not a complainer, but I do want to let people know what I go through daily, and sometimes it's rough, but I have a positive attitude and I try to make the best of life and everyday things and challenges. So that's what I wanted to share. Who wants to go next, Sarah or David?
I'll go next. So I've been very blessed because we moved to LA, which is a pretty welcoming community overall, at least all the people I've met. So not a lot of issues with like race or being part of the LGBTQ plus community. I would say my shyness is an issue, but I'm working on it. I'm really a one-to-one in small groups, obviously, as a doctor, but and then with the rest of we're a small community. But I'm working on that. I'm getting better, including being part of this, panel.
Challenge that I face daily. I mean, there are a number, I think, but I think in this context, for adoptees, what a lot of people may not fully kind of recognize happens with a lot of adoptees is a sense of perpetually feeling like you don't fully fit in any one space. So when I'm with Latino folk in Latino communities, I never feel fully like that's where I belong because I wasn't raised in that culture, even though that's my heritage culture. And then in white communities, even though I was raised in those communities, I don't always feel like I belong because of my physical presentation or just my internal knowledge that I am not of those people originally. And same in Jewish communities. I've been raised in a Jewish community my entire life, and it feels closest to home for me, but also I know that throughout my life, many people have questioned my Jewish identity. And so there's this sense of self-awareness in a way that's a challenge, I would say pretty regularly. And it's not something that always is negative, but it's certainly something that I have in the back of my head in most contexts, whether I'm in Jewish community, white community, or Latino community. And it's a challenge, especially if you're wanting to feel like you want to be part of a community that embraces you in your totality, and you are a little uncertain about what that even means for yourself. So figuring that out is a challenge.
Sarah, you want to go next? Oh, we did that already, sorry. Okay, so let me see what I have next. I think we kind of all answered answered this question already, but I'll ask it anyways. Do you, as a Jewish person of color, or a person with a disability, and or a Jewish person in the LGBTQ community, feel welcome and a sense of belonging here at Kol Tikva?
Absolutely. I love it here. I'm really happy we're members of Kol for a long time.
Susan?
Yes and no. And I would say predominantly yes, right? Which is why I'm so excited to be here, because I really feel like when I have an opportunity to meet people at Kol Tikva, and I have an opportunity to learn about people here and speak about who I am and my family, I feel like I've gotten nothing but positive responses. So in that regard, I see Kol Tikva trying to open their doors and welcome everyone in, and that really means the world to me, and that's why we're members, and that's why I'm doing this stuff, because when I feel that sense of effort and intent, it's very encouraging, and that is not always the case, and that has not always been the case for me. And at the same time, when I'm in a room with pretty much all white Jewish folk, I also feel a sense of self-reflection or self-awareness that doesn't always feel comfortable. And sometimes that internally makes me feel a little less like I belong. But that's not necessarily a judgment of the community. I think that's just something to be aware of as a community, that people of color may experience that regardless of your actions or intents. And it's something that I think we can continue to improve as we build up Kol Tikva's community.
Thank you. And my answer is yes overall, except for a few problems when we have events that I can't use the parking upstairs. That gets me frustrated. But overall, yes, I feel very welcome here, and it made me a board position, so I must be special. Okay, so the next question I want to say before Cynthia leaves, because I know she has to go, and this was her idea for me to go first. Cynthia's been great on my committee. She's wonderful. All my committee is wonderful, but she's very helpful. She even takes minutes for me in my meetings sometimes. Thank you. So what is a common question that you get? So she wants me to tell you all about my van story that I told at our board meeting. So I'm not going to say who it was because I don't want to embarrass her in case she gets mad. But somebody asked a question when I did the teaching at the board meeting for Jewish Disability Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month. And sorry for those of you over there, you're going to hear it again. What was I going to say? Somebody asked me, thank you, Wade. How do I drive that big van? Okay, so I said, funny you should ask that. Well, it's really not that difficult to drive the van, but I've had it for several years already. This one's longer than the last one I had. The most difficult part is parking. But I had trouble getting the van because I had to fight for it. So when I think I was maybe 17 years old, my mom took me to a Department of Rehab in Downey, which is Rancho Los Amigos, to find out if I would be able to drive or not. And they did the evaluation and they said, oh yeah, she's short, but that's okay. We've had people shorter than her that can drive, 3 foot something tall, and I was over 4 feet. Okay, so that's fine. Oh, she has arthritis, but that's okay. We've had people that are quadriplegics that we teach how to drive. So, of course she can drive. So we just have to make some adaptations in the van and figure out what she needs, and yeah, she'll be able to drive. Okay, so that was good news. I found out that I could drive, so I could be more independent. And when I started taking driving lessons, they told me that the Department of Rehab wouldn't buy me a van until I had my license. Well, how do you get a license if you don't have the right kind of van you need to drive? So, and of course they didn't want to spend all the money on the adaptations that I needed before I passed to get my license. So I had to use a van that wasn't equipped right for me, and but it did have a lift on it so I could get in and out. And I went through a couple of teachers because the first one didn't teach me what a blind intersection was, so I failed my first test. And I got mad at him and he said, well, that's not important. I said, yes, it is important. What if I hit someone or someone hits me? Oh my gosh, I was so mad. Because I could have passed, I could have had it probably 90% on the test. Anyway, so I had to find another teacher, and I ended up at the Rancho Los Amigos again for my final teacher, and he was very strict. He made me cry several times because he was so mean. But I finally passed the test. So, anyways, after that, I had to fight to get the van still because they said, what do you need a van for? I said, so I can get around, I can be independent. I was in college at UC Riverside. They said, but you don't have a job. I said, but I have school, I have to go places myself, I can't rely on transportation all the time. Anyways, me and my parents had to fight for it because they told me I just needed a license and then they would get me the van and then they changed their mind. So I'm telling you this story not only for my struggle, what I went through, but so you know how our government treats people that are disabled. That's just one example. You have to fight for almost everything that you need. And Jake, who's on our committee, I'm sure he had to fight also, just so you all know, he's in training for a guide dog, which is going to be a great help for him and his independence. Like the van was a great thing for my independence and my wheelchair. A guide dog is going to be great independence for Jake, sure, for those of you who don't know him, he's a great guy. So, is that good enough, Cynthia, for my story? Everything? Okay, thank you, Paul. Who wants to go next? David?
Sure. A question I get asked a lot. I guess there are two that are coming to mind most. I'll say the first one is directly about adoption. Usually when I talk about being adopted, one of the first questions I get is, have you or do you plan to find or look for your birth family or your biological family? And that's a really complex answer for me. It has changed over my life. I would say for 90% of my life thus far, the answer was a quick no. And my reason has been, I have been adopted into a fantastic family that loves and supports me. I don't feel any need to find my biological family. There's no need to be filled there. There's nothing missing. And as I've gotten older and in recent years, and especially since having my own kids, my first biological relatives I've known were also here. And that, like, just so you know, when I talk about adoption, I often cry, or as I say, sometimes I leak. And it's just me processing my emotions. It's totally cool if that happens, just to let you know. But in recent years, since having my own kids and knowing what it feels like to have a biological family, my feelings have changed about wanting to find my roots in a way. And it's a challenge because for a lot of adoptees, there's a tension between wanting to make sure that your adopted family feels like you love and support them, or that you at least acknowledge that they love and support you, and that is not mutually exclusive from also wanting to know more about where you come from. And that's a very hard tension to navigate. Because another question I get often is kind of more of a placed judgment, like, aren't you grateful that you were adopted? And in some ways, I'm very grateful that I was adopted because I have an amazing family that resulted from it. My life today would not be the same if I wasn't adopted. And at the same time, and this is often true for adoptees or people with complex identities, multiple things can be true at once. So yes, in some ways I am grateful, but I know that for me, adoption is a traumatic experience that happened to me as a child because I was taken from my biological family. And there's lots to be said about whether or not it would have been better or worse for me for that to happen. But I think regardless of anyone's perspectives on those kind of deeper questions, there's just a fundamental hurt that happens when you're taken from your family and you have no connection to where you come from in that way. So I think the concept of adoption as trauma is something that people really are struggling to wrap their head around these days. But I think it's really important that if you're going to, especially in Jewish communities have been really involved in adoption for quite a long time with very positive, lovely intent. And I think that that's beautiful. I also think it's important that we look at adoption very complexly and through a trauma-informed lens so we can really support kids that are coming up with some of these challenges and questions in Jewish community. So yeah, those are some of the questions I get a lot.
Thank you. Sarah?
I would say where I'm from, the wildlife was here before moving to the US. So I had a small family. I went to so Catholic school, and played a lot of sports, including chess, running, basketball. And then in Peru, people graduate at 16, and then you go to whichever program you want to go. So you want to be a lawyer, you go directly to law school, review school, so you don't have to know what you want to do pretty early on. Fortunately, I always knew since I was a little kid, so I could go to med school, and it was really nice. But then eventually my family moved here, because of family issues, but I'm really happy here.
Sorry, everybody heard that. You weren't supposed to.
I'll just tell you. So I have a little Chinese heritage, so I'm Filipino. So my patients who actually are disappointed when I didn't know that I'm not. They say, "Oh, I thought you were Filipino." I'm like, "No, I'm sorry."
Okay, now we're going to open it up to the audience for questions. Just raise your hand and I'll call on you. Any questions for us? No question is a dumb question. Cynthia?
So it's great to hear your positive feedback about TICFA, but what else can we do? What more can we do?
Lisa, can you repeat the question so those viewing online can hear?
So the question is, it's great to hear that you have positive feelings about FOTICA, but what else can we do to make it better, right? Yeah. Who wants to go first? David?
I got lots of ideas.
Let the audience answer first. Huh?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
That question, what could we do, makes me think, whose responsibility is it to do something about it so that we can decide, do we answer this great question together, or is it the panel's responsibility to solve this problem?
Yeah, I like that. Okay, so to say that out loud, in addition to what was originally asked, which is what more can Kol Tikva do to be more inclusive, the addendum to that was whose responsibility is it to make these efforts happen? And I'm happy to start the conversation about that. This is a great start. This kind of thing, conversation, interpersonal experience, connecting with one another as humans is really valuable. So like the more opportunities I get to speak with somebody about who I am and where I come from, the more trust I feel and safe I feel in a place. So this is really great. I would say there are a lot of things that can be done at an organizational level, which would further, I think, racial justice pursuits within Jewish community, and I'm sure Sarah has thoughts on this as well. I think it would be wonderful to continue to build programs related to the issue of racial justice and how it connects with Jewish values as we move through coming years. I think finding opportunities to connect with communities of color external to our own, so some sort of kind of positive affiliation that we could have with a local mosque or churches or other religious communities that are seeking similar kind of bridges together would be really wonderful for us to find some ties that bind. And I think that would show a lot from our community about really putting our time and effort and literally money if we're giving to causes that are related to supporting communities of color. Those are things I think we could do. With regard to responsibilities, one thing I will say is and I'll speak for myself, in the various marginalized identities I carry, being a person of color or an adoptee, it is often hard if you're expected to be the one to always speak to these issues. And there's lots of terms for this, but I guess my point is I really love when folks that are in kind of majority community identities, in this case, predominantly white Jews here, asking those questions and being okay with making mistakes but coming back. That's like the primary responsibility. I would really love white allyship in Jewish spaces to look like continued, structured, persistent effort with a sense of humility, a sense that you're gonna make mistakes and maybe say the wrong thing, and that's okay, because I'm gonna do the same thing and make mistakes myself. And if we both accept that we're in this together for a shared purpose of building a community or shared camaraderie, that's really all I need to feel like we're moving in the right direction. So I'd rather have people try and make mistakes than to not show up.
Thank you. Sarah, anything for that?
I shouldn't go after you, my answers are not that deep. You're so profound, that's really nice. I would say supporting Lisa in accessibility. Sometimes we feel left out, like when we kind of enjoy the gala as much because she suffers parking. And when I drive and bring her little wheelchair, it's not the same. It's not comfortable. And last time we almost got hit by the gate when we were trying to go back to the van. So that's kind of scary. So we may skip out the gala this year because we don't want to have that issue.
Yeah, pretty much the same. That's how I feel. But I want to leave it up to the audience because maybe you guys have some ideas what we can do to make things better for us. Your son has to say something.
Separate question.
Question? Anyone
ahead.
have any?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What is your reaction when someone asks you about what it's like to be a Jew of color or
So to repeat the question, Milo asked, what's it like when people ask you, what is it like to be a Jew of color? And then he also added on, or being adopted. Sarah, do you want to start us off on
I don't get the question a lot. I have a lot of support here. A lot of people saw me doing the Shema when I converted. It was online, but a lot of the people saw me were here. And I work, quite a few of my colleagues are Jewish. And you know, some of them ask me, oh, so you did ancient Judaism, you converted, you're going to go to rabbinical school now.
When I get asked what it's like to be a Jew of color these days, I get very excited because I've had some really wonderful experiences in recent years where I've kind of found my people in that space. I've been part of some really amazing kind of leadership development opportunities. I was part of this organization called Selah. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with it. They're part of Bend the Arc, which is like a national Jewish organization. And they have a subdivision called Selah, which is a leadership training cohort where they bring together about 20 folks that identify as Jewish leaders, and they do a year-long process of training and community building and support then forever after. So I'm still part of this community. And what's been amazing about that is for the past, I want to say, 10 cohorts, the organization has identified specifically a need to build up Jewish leaders of color in this space. So the cohorts have been geared specifically towards people who identify as Jews of color. And so my sister, my big sister, who's 7 years older than me, she's a white Jew, and she was part of it before it was specifically Jewish leaders of color. And she told me, hey Dave, like this is a spot you need to check out, like you would be perfect for this. And so I joined that group, and that changed my life because it was the first time in my life I've been in a Jewish space where everyone there had a complex relationship to their identity that made me feel like I was at home. And it's great because it was very inspiring to figure out, wow, like if this type of Judaism is where we're going, where people are really looking to build bridges and be inclusive, and Jewish leaders of color are being encouraged to be part of Jewish communities rather than being questioned for being there. It's just really exciting. So these days, when people ask me about what it's like to be a Jew of color, I just get excited because I'm so amped about where we're going, and I feel like I have a lot of support in it, and it's very, very fun to do this kind of work. So yeah, that's my answer. It's pretty great.
Yes, go ahead.
Well, I think all of your comments make me think of the converse of this as a white person, which is trying to figure out for myself the notion of empathy. Like, you know, if you go to another country like China, or we've lived in India or family, so such a different culture. How do I come to feel that sense of oneness with other people who are different than me? And sometimes I've never figured that out, and sometimes I've been fortunate enough to have experiences, and sometimes those experiences have been surprising, like a group of us got together and did a simulation or a role play in which there were a lot of aha moments for us. I remember doing this with a bunch of people who were extremely wealthy, and which some of them were part of a society that was very poor, that we began to see what happens when one another don't understand that some of us were born with silver spoons and some of us with rusty spoons. And that was such a moving thing, and I sitting here as a white person, feel that, never mind you folks, I have a lot of work to do. I don't quite know how to approach that, like who's responsible for this. Don't necessarily need your help, but we need somebody's help, and this organization will be a perfect model that has an interest and so forth in creating or thinking through all of us situations, and then trying them out, and maybe they'll fail, like you say, or not, that's okay, to see if we can sort of deal with this issue. Like you were saying, David, you spent 90% of your life taking one position on something, and then now 10% of your life, things have changed, and sometimes it takes a long time to do it, sometimes it just takes a change of environment. And the environment that I'm in day to day is not that environment. So kind of excited to think about ways in which in an hour or two or so forth, little by little, we as a group could capture what is that perfect organization, that perfect synagogue. What would that look like? What does it feel like? I think of the story of the Jews crossing Sinai in the Bible, and God says, I don't think it's a good idea for you folks to go to the land of honey, because you don't even know what honey looks like. You got to wait here and figure this out, and then go, because I don't want you to root crops. And I feel like I'm, in that position of I want to take the right steps to get there.
Yeah.
Well, I'm willing to make mistakes, but I don't certainly want to do something that is irrelevant.
Yeah, there was a lot in that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take a stab at that if that's okay.
Summarize.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, summarizing that might be a challenge. However, I would say the question was like, how do we build a kind of a sense of welcoming, or I would say a sense of welcoming and inclusivity broadly at a synagogue level.
Yeah.
Okay. One thing I've heard from a lot of Jews of color that I've worked with recently is when they go into Jewish spaces, specifically synagogue, the most common tension they feel is being responded to in these spaces as if they don't naturally feel welcomed in them because it's not expected. Something about the way they present themselves is responded to by the community as, oh, why are you here? You know, instead of, we're so glad you're here, right? And there's a fundamental difference. Even if the why are you here is coming from a place of genuine, oh, I'm curious, right? It can be often received in a way as, why do I have to explain myself, right? I'm coming here to connect with my religious identity or religious community. And if you come into a space and you're questioned, why are you here? It's a pretty quick way to feel like you don't belong. So I would say, if you see somebody new at synagogue, regardless of, and I think this really goes for all people,
Newcomers.
any newcomer, really, or even somebody you've seen a few times, like just be, I'm so excited you're here. Like I've been, many of you I've seen for years here, and it would just be so cool if there was just this kind of sense, and I know many of you do this because I've experienced it, but that sense of like, we're so excited you're here. Like, have you met so-and-so? Have you had a chance to meet the rabbi? Like, that just like, there's a phrase and there's a program built around this by the URJ, the Union of Reform Judaism, called audacious hospitality. So what does audacious hospitality look like? It's courageously welcoming people into our space, right? And I think that that's particularly challenging right now for a lot of Jewish communities because many of us feel like we're under attack in a new way. So how do you balance a sense of wanting to maintain a safe space with security and protections for our religious community, and also welcome in new folk in a way that makes them feel like they belong there instantly, right? And that's something that we need to work on because honestly, like it sketches me out to have armed guards here. And I know it doesn't feel comfortable for many people, but I know for my Black Jewish colleagues, it feels particularly threatening to have armed security or police nearby because of their relationship with police that a lot of white folk don't necessarily recognize. So many of us may feel safe in a place with armed security if we don't have issues historically with that structure, but if we do, or if other people do historically, it's not the same feeling. So things like that from an organizational perspective, I would be very excited about figuring out. And just like a sense of just say welcome all the time, but yeah, that's a bit of a long answer.
Or even just say, nice to see you, haven't seen you for a while, yeah. Does anyone in the audience want to share some ideas what we can do to make things better here at Code Kidwood?
Well, I have a sense from what you're saying, David. Oh, what? I have a sense from...
No.
I would say, I think we have a lot of young families and older communities, and we need to do more to bring in young people, I think, 20s and 30s.
I think that we have now a plethora of young families and kids going through the B'nai Mitzvah program, and then we have older families, and I think a lot of families, they connect to their Jewish identity during the B'nai Mitzvah time, and then we kind of lose, like as they get older in high school and everything, in college. But then we actually, David and I hosted an event at our house, and there were a lot of 20 and 30-something-year-old single folks, a lot of Jews of color, and they didn't have a place. They felt like they didn't know where to go, and they feel like they're too young for some of our spaces, like they don't have kids and they don't want them right now. So what could we do as a community to bring in young people? And that would in itself, because younger populations are diverse in so many ways and can teach us so much, I think it would help modernize things as well and continue our pipeline, of course, for membership, but also just like enrich the community.
Can I speak again?
Yeah.
I don't need a
That was
microphone.
good, Shannon, you just
I'm
had to
totally
sit on the
okay with
membership
that.
committee.
Yeah, good job, Shannon.
I'm seeing board members, this is
Just so
like.
you know, Shannon is not allowed to volunteer for anything.
Yes, she is.
First of all, thank you so much for putting this together. I think now is really critical to be having this conversation. We know there are things going on in states that are very counterproductive to the very topics that we're discussing. So I appreciate that. I'm the cantorial trustee, so your cantor is entrusted to me. Joel and I have a great vision of a wonderfully thriving music scene. Just kind of boiling down to, wow, you guys see Friday nights at Coltigba. They have this music thing going on. And the reason I'm a proponent of that is because when my wife and I met, I think we looked at each other and just said, hey, let's be Jewish. And we found Coltigba. And we were heading towards engagement and and so we had sort of rekindled that for ourselves and with each other. And so I think that you're right on. It's to get a younger, generation in here because they'll also stay, from a congregational point of view. But one of the things that we're really excited about is developing this sort of music scene, whether it was People's Shabbat, more work with the choir, a youth choir, and then just almost like a rotation of these great musicians coming in Friday nights to play, whether it's a violinist or, so, that is one of the things that we are, really zeroing in on right now. But you hit it right on the head. And again, thank you. I appreciate that this town is doing what you're doing today.
Thank you. And I just wanted to add one comment to what Shannon was saying about the younger people and the single people. Because I was single for many years and I felt bad when all my friends were getting married because I felt like they didn't want to be my friend anymore because I was single. And not just being single, but being younger, like you said, 20s and 30s. There are a lot of multicultural, I'm not sure what the current term is for, but multicultural, multiracial, and dual religious, is that the term for it? One person is Catholic or Christian, and one person is Jewish in the relationship. There's a lot of those, interfaith, that's the word I was looking for. Not just in 20s and 30s, but in all age groups. And the hardest thing, you're right, is keeping them after they graduate or go to college or whatever, yeah. Or after even the B'nai Mitzvah, sometimes the families leave. That's true. Thank you. Anyone else from the audience want to share some ideas? Questions? Yeah, Tina.
Well, thank you all for sharing your stories and the people in the audience. I'm not quite sure how to frame what I'm thinking. I agree with everything that people have said, and I'm looking to the next step. So, these are great ideas, but what do we do to make something that actually happens, an event or something that brings people in? How do we attract them? I wouldn't know how to even advertise. So when you were talking about particular people that you know, is this something personal from your friends or from work? Or so what would we do next? I think we're all receptive to that. And we really want to create a feeling of belonging here for all people. And I would welcome any concrete ideas.
Good job, Tina.
So I don't know, I don't know if I'm kind of concrete ideas, but I also wanted to think about something that you said earlier, David, about trying to make connections with other congregations, and that's not necessarily making our space specifically more welcoming, but it establishes connections and it could be a great thing to grow. One of the things that I was thinking about, I didn't get together for our last time is around the issue of voting rights and connecting with communities that have been traditionally underrepresented in voting, and I think that's a great opportunity for us to connect to communities both here in LA and more broadly to basically bring that racial justice aspect to our community a little bit more vibrantly. So that's a specific thing, and we'll work on it soon.
Thank you.
There are some existing organizations that are already doing really wonderful work that have people locally that are engaged in specifically racial justice work or kind of these ideas of audacious hospitality or how do you connect social justice with Jewish values. And these are organizations that I've worked with and that I have some connections with. Like the event Shannon was mentioning was part of an organization called Jutina. I'm on the board of advisors for that organization, and they're specifically an organization that is designed to lift up and celebrate the intersections of Latin and Jewish culture. And it's a really wonderful organization that now I consider that the two founders of it my great friends. One of the founders, Kimi Dueñas, her sister is Samantha Dueñas, who you may know runs our synagogue school, or a Hebrew school, is part of who runs our synagogue school here. So we have already built in some kind of organically grown connections, and I'm on the board of that organization, and I also go here. So there's some opportunities for shared experiences, and that event actually was really exciting for us because without really much effort, we found 15 Jews of color between essentially 20 and 35 that were champing at the bit to come hang out and have a space. And, we're still in touch with them, and it would be great if we could be like, hey, honestly, one of the best ways is food.
Food, I know.
Yeah, food. It's food.
We're good at that.
So if you're gonna have an event, even hey, bring your families, what are your heritage dishes? Where do your people's food come from? Let's bring it all together. Let's do a Purim grounded in Persian Jewish history, because that's where the story of Purim comes from. There are a lot of Persian Jews that would really be excited about that, I imagine. Let's talk about what the Passover Seder looks like in Peru. What are these things, and see what happens. And even if members of those communities don't come, we can still have educational experiences where we talk about that. But I think that there's opportunities to connect existing special moments that we do so well here at Kol Tikva with a specific ask or a specific bit of added content that might be a signal to people, we'd love to have you here too.
Great ideas, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be in touch.
Yeah, I like those ideas, really good. Anybody else? Questions, comments?
So I was going to ask, I know that Zodi was going to go through the conversion studying process, just if you can provide us some of those Jewish gems of wisdom that call us to be open to diversity that you might have come across at some point. Listening to the Venn Arc folks and during their training, they must have tried to draw some connections to that. Just to cue us in, this is in our Jewish DNA, if you will, to be open.
Did you want that question for Sarah or all of us? Or?
I'm just curious. She's maybe had the one to study Judaism.
Yeah.
I would say learn by example, because from the rabbi from Packer, he's open and teaching me a lot. So, you want to give back. But I think I would say more by example in general. Because I already knew over the years that I wanted to belong, or I already belong from everybody throughout 20 years that I've been in the U.S. It wasn't one specific thing, it was overall the idea, the concept that I learned.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Let me add one
Sure.
real quick. I think there's some pretty wonderful Jewish value connections with some of these topics. The first one that always comes to mind for me is the concept of tikkun olam, healing the world or healing hurt. And what does that look like? I think in at least my Jewish experience, it's often been focused on environmental issues, and that is wonderful. I think we definitely need to do that as well. But I think that there's a lot of social distance and social hurts that if we conceptually align it with something like the idea of tikkun olam, it can really resonate, I think, with Jewish people that understand that value generally. I also think the idea of tzedakah is like a really powerful concept that many of us get in our head, and it looks kind of like essentially contributing financially in some way, usually, or with food, and I think those are great ideas. But I think thinking about kind of where we put those efforts and what kind of organizations or groups of people we're supporting and what are our expectations around that could be pushed a little bit further. And I think there's some like foundational stories in Judaism that like resonate with me so much more now than they ever did before. Like it wasn't like, have y'all seen the Disney animated movie, the Prince of Egypt? It's an outstanding movie, and I hadn't seen it as a kid somehow. I just like missed it. I don't know, but I've always loved Passover, and I love that story. But something about watching that animated film a couple years ago with my boys like really hit me in a different way, because that story is about an adoptee. Like Moses was taken from his family at birth, or given up at birth, to be saved and protected because the Jewish people were being threatened. And he was raised essentially, you know, in a different community, in a different cultural group. And then there was great tension about what that meant. And I think that there's so many stories in Judaism that allow us to investigate things like identity and connection to community. And the Purim story is another one that was Persian Jews being persecuted because they're Jewish. And I think there's a lot of historical ties we can make between our history as an oppressed people and our survival, which is so fundamental, I think, to Jewish identity, and how that should build empathy in us for other people's struggles, and how can we support them in honor of our own Jewish survival. And that would be pretty cool, I think.
Thank you. I'm in Rabbi John Storiston, and this is on Monday. So last Monday and tomorrow we're talking about Exodus 22. I don't know what verses they are, but what repeats a couple times is the verse about us welcoming the stranger because we were strangers once in the land of Egypt. And it's repeated, which Rabbi John says is very significant if something in the Torah is repeated. And I think that should be a basis for whenever we have strangers, to be welcoming and try to give them a sense of belonging.
Thank you, Tina. And just a comment about what you just said about being repeated. It is a thing in Judaism, and I've always done it myself for remembering things, not even knowing it was a thing of Judaism. But Rabbi John says you say something 3 times, Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, because it's intention. So we all here today, I'm sure you all came here for a different reason. Maybe you came to support one of us, maybe you came to learn something, maybe you came because you were curious. We don't have time now to go around the room and ask everybody why they came, but everybody came here for a reason. But remember, intention is an important word, because if you intend to do something, then you want to plan to work on whatever that intention is. Like Tina's question about how can we, I'm sorry, Tina, I forgot the question. How can we include everybody? And David had some ideas about food. So it's just that we don't want to forget about intention, because it sometimes goes to the back burner, like a lot of things. We say, oh, it's not in our budget, or oh, we don't have time to plan that, we don't have time to do that. We have one excuse or another for not doing it. But I think everybody here today, hopefully you're going to go home with intention to help us plan something. You don't have to join a committee, but even send an email. So just so you guys all know, I'm sure hopefully you're all on our email list. If not, you can speak to Jessica after. She'll get you on it. But my committee has an email, inclusion@koltikva.org, so you can send something anonymously there, and I'm the only one that opens hands it up as of now. Until I'm not on the board anymore, I'll pass it along to someone else. But you can send any comments or questions there and help us with any ideas in case you're shy to open it up here. So that's what I wanted to say about that. And I think, unless anybody else has any questions, David, do you want to say something else? Oh, okay. Sure. We're going to wrap it up here. And help yourself to bagels and for water, coffee, tea. And thank you again for everyone who come in.
Thank you.